All right, hello everyone. All right, today's presentation is going to be on integrating project and portfolio management. My name is Lateef Daly. I'm Director of Europe and Middle East Operations for ARES Software, or ARES PRISM. Where's that automating? 1 second. So to give you some background on me, I've got 20 plus years of project controls experience, specializing in finance, estimating, cost engineering, change management, and systems integration. How's this going? 1 second. Yep. Industries I've worked in have been pharmaceutical, defense, infrastructure, rail, nuclear, and a little bit of oil and gas. Some of the major projects I've worked on have been Crossrail, Transport for London, High Speed 2, Horizon Nuclear, Expo 2020 in the Middle East, and Ronald Reagan Ballistic Missile Defense Center out in Marshall Islands. Okay. The outline for today, we're going to cover a little bit of ARES PRISM background, so you understand what the company is and what we do. We'll talk about project lifecycle management and how to bring all the different pieces of a project together that you need to manage that project. We'll talk about enterprise portfolio management. How do you manage multiple different projects and consolidate it all under a single enterprise structure? We'll talk about how to get common coding in place so that you can get common and consistent coding across your project or portfolio. Cost schedule integration, so you can get proper cost schedule integration for doing earned value analysis. Utilizing various progress methods to get physical progress % complete. And we'll talk about our integration engine, which is a client customizable integration tool where you can build your own integrations and automate the exchange of data between multiple different data sources. We'll talk about the benefits of having a data warehouse to take snapshots of your data. And then talk about data integrity and validation and automating that so that you can ensure that your data is accurate. And then we'll lastly touch on reporting. So to give you some background on ARES PRISM, the company's been around since 1992. PRISM has been involved since 1995, and we recently opened an office in the UK about 6 years ago. And in the 6 years we've been operating in the UK, we have about 170 billion worth of scope going through PRISM now, just in the UK. So huge uptake in the market here. And a lot of our success has come from word of mouth from existing clients who've been very happy with the product and the implementations we've helped them do. Part of what PRISM does, we have global clients around the world, and everyone always asks, well, what industry is PRISM best suited for? And our concept is it's an off-the-shelf solution that's built with your common best practices in mind. If you look at some of our clients from different industries, infrastructure, you probably recognize a lot of those, such as High Speed 2, Crossrail, Transport for London. We have nuclear and energy clients, oil and gas, mining and metals, EPC, and government clients. And this is only a sample section. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of clients around the world. But the concept here is that we build the application to push those best practices and principles so that our concept is a project is a project is a project. There is no set industry. I mean, there are certain best practices for every project, regardless of what industry you're working in or what type of project you're managing. And if the tool can help promote those best practices, you're more likely to succeed and deliver your project on time and within schedule. PRISM covers an entire integrated life cycle or lifecycle management of a project. So we have an integration engine where we can actually automate the integrations between various different applications and do validation checks, and actually clients can customize that themselves. We have an estimating platform which is powered by a product called CostOS. And part of the reason we have an estimating partner is because we were starting to build the integrations between the estimating platform and our cost and performance module, so that we can automatically bring the baseline data in and link that up with the schedule and start tracking progress against that. We have a cost and performance module where you can go in and you can track all your cost and performance, your various different budgets, whether it be performance budgets or financial budgets, and also track your forecast and your earned value against that every period. We do change management. So we have an integrated change management tool where you can track changes across all of your projects and across all modules so that you can have a period-to-period traceability of all the different changes you're submitting and keep track of all that, and also route those for review and approval electronically within the system. We have an engineering platform where you can track engineering deliverables and define your rules of credit for how you get a progress engineering and design deliverables. So you get a physical % complete that's common and consistent from your engineering teams. We track equipment and materials, so you can track all the equipment and materials, where those are located at. Track all your contract award values, compensation events, and track all the different items associated with the contract and the pay items. Invoice management, procurement, so tracking all your purchase orders. Field progressing, where you're tracking quantities installed versus planned quantity to get a physical % complete from your construction teams, as opposed to a rough guesstimate. Document management, And then we have dashboard reporting, which is on top of the tool. So the tool itself has reporting within it, but then we have a layer of dashboard reports powered by Sisense and Tableau. One of the best things about PRISM is that it gives you the ability to, at an enterprise level, to define your common coding structure, define your calendars, define the team that has access to that, define which cost elements you want to track, whether you want to track labor, material, equipment, define the currency exchange rates, and you can have as many different currency exchange rates as you need to track within your organization, and then set up your report formats at a central organization. Now, once you set up the enterprise, and that's kind of your central team managing your entire portfolio of projects or managing your entire organization, you then can set up individual standalone projects. And each project can have its own coding structure, its own calendars, its own teams that have access to it, its own exchange rates, its own cost elements, and its own report formats. And you can either copy the enterprise structure down to that project so that you have consistent approach to every time you do a new project, or you can create a completely different project structure. And then you can still map that project structure to your enterprise structure so that you can get common reporting across your entire portfolio. And every time you set up a project, you can either use that same structure used on another project, the structure used at your enterprise level, or create a completely new structure. This way you have the flexibility to manage the different challenges that different projects have and the variations that projects have, but still be able to map everything to a common structure and still do common portfolio reporting and management. And you still have a single point of truth for all your data. You don't have to go to different databases or different systems to get all access to your project performance data. So integrated coding structures, how do you come up with that? First thing we do when we do an implementation is we define that integrated coding structure. And that integrated coding structure is what's going to bring complete traceability between your estimate, your cost and progress data, your schedule, and your contracts data. So you have all that data coming into a single source of truth. To set that structure up, what we'll generally do is look at how are you structuring your estimates? How are you pricing up the original baseline estimate? What sort of coding structure is the estimating team using? We'll look at your cost and reporting requirements. And not just how are you tracking actuals in your ERP system, but how are you actually reporting the scope of that work and who's responsible at each level of that hierarchy. We'll look at your schedule data and how are you structuring the schedule activities. And we'll look at the contracts data. How are you awarding your contracts and the pay items in your contracts? Now what we find is generally within organizations, each of these disciplines tends to work in their own silo and do their own thing and come up with their own coding structures. And you can't get the different disciplines to talk to each other. And it's a lot of work to have to manually map all this data together. So we try to promote getting a common coding structure so that we can find an integration touch point between all those different sources of data, and that then becomes your control account within PRISM. So you can bring all that data into PRISM. Now, if you can get common coding, that's great. That's the ideal place to be. Sometimes you can't. So our integration engine allows you to do mapping so that you can map different data sources to PRISM and get the correct mapping that you need and have it all automated, not have to manually import and export Excel spreadsheets every period. And then once you have this becomes the backbone of your project. That PRISM structure, everything you do on that project gets mapped to that PRISM structure. And it promotes that common and consistent approach to tracking your projects. So once you have this in place, then you'll find that you're awarding your estimate packages in a common structure. You're issuing your RFPs and doing your bid comparisons in a common structure that relates to the original baseline estimate. So you have like-for-like comparisons. You're awarding your contract pay items consistent with that structure. Measuring your progress and performance of that structure. Tracking invoice and actuals at the same structure, and ultimately monitoring and making payments at the same structure. So complete traceability throughout the life cycle of a project. Another thing we do is there's a lot of programs that we come into contact with. They do cost-loaded schedules, and they always talk about the pain of doing cost-loaded schedules and having to track to the nth level of degree where your budgets and forecasts are and trying to manage changes to that and manage multiple different budgets or forecasts. A lot of the problems you see are the level of granularity between the estimate and the plan is not always clear and mappable, so you can struggle to map that between those two systems. Date changes in duration can skew historical and to-date performance. So you actually get performance variances that don't make any sense. It's purely because you've moved a schedule activity around and it's moved history around with it. It can be difficult to manage cost changes, difficult to manage multiple budgets, and very time-consuming and difficult to set up and maintain. So cost-loaded schedules can become very burdensome for programs to manage. So in PRISM, we do cost schedule integration. We have out-of-the-box connections directly to P6 or Microsoft Project. And what we do is we bring in the original baseline estimate, whether using our product or the product we use, CostOS, or using a separate estimating platform. You'll build up your original baseline estimate in that estimating tool. You'll build up a program plan in your P6 or Microsoft Project tool or whatever scheduling platform you're using. And then the details from that data gets mapped to your control accounts in PRISM, and all of that detail gets loaded in there. so that now you have totals against all your control accounts, and you have time phasing that all relates to the different data sources you're pulling together. And within PRISM, you're then able to do cost, progress, and performance reporting, and also your time phase profiles. So now you're using the right tool for the right job, using the estimating platform to price at the original baseline estimate, and using the schedule tool to build your, to do your critical path analysis and build your schedule logic. And you're not mixing the two up. And you're using PRISM as the integration tool to bring it all together. So you're getting true integration of your disciplines, clear traceability between those systems, because you can see the details of the data within PRISM. You don't need to go into each application to review those details. You're eliminating the need to cost load your schedule, which many of our clients have done. And you're getting a single point of truth for all reporting and analysis. And you're not having to try and compare and figure out why different tools are giving different totals. So now within PRISM, you can run time phase cost plan and see what your plan is every period and measure yourself against that. You can track your actual cost work performed each period, track your earned value each period, and then ultimately report on your schedule variances, to-date cost variances, and ultimately your variance at complete as to where your budget and your forecast are going to be at the end of the program. PRISM also allows you to utilize a variety of progressing methods, because each piece of scope may have a different method, a different way it needs to be progressed. So in PRISM, in the cost module, you have control accounts, which are kind of the integration touch point that all your data is being mapped to. And some of the common methods of progressing are, first you have schedule activities. So people will take their schedule, the activities from P6 or Microsoft Project, map those to the control account, and weight those against the control account, and use those schedule activities, the progress of those activities, to drive the performance of that control account. So you have traceability between the cost and the schedule. Some people use engineering deliverables, and they'll define the rules of credit for how they're going to track and progress engineering. This is kind of akin to what some people will call EPPR, Engineering Performance and Productivity Reporting. That can drive the percent complete on your control account for your engineering scope. There's procurement and contracts options, where you can link pay items from a contract or purchase items to drive the percentage of, or the percent complete on the control account. And you can also do construction quantities installed. So if you have a planned quantity of 100 and you've installed 50, you're now 50% complete on that control account. And you can roll all these different detailed items up to that control account. So you have complete traceability. There's probably about 25 to 30 different methods that PRISM actually provides for updating a control account. And we can link to various different sources to bring those progress updates into PRISM, if you're not tracking it directly in PRISM itself. Integrated change management. So generally in organizations, you'll have cost engineers or QSs. You'll have lots of different project managers who they report to. You'll then have some layer of senior management, a layer of directors, and then ultimately a board or program at the very top who kind of oversees everything. You define these different positions within PRISM and who fills these roles. And all of these people get set up in PRISM as reviewers and approvers within PRISM, and they get assigned to control accounts. You also give them various different levels of approval authority. So they may have a different level of approval authority over performance budget versus forecast. Then as you submit your change records within the tool, the value of that change record and the control accounts that's impacting will then determine how that change routes through the system for review and approval. And this is all done by email. So as the different reviewers and approvers receive that email, they can go in and then review and approve those changes directly into PRISM. And now you're not waiting for pieces of paper to make their way around from various different job sites to get signed up before you know that a budget or forecast change is coming. You'll see the budget and forecast change the day it's raised, and you'll be able to track it throughout the life cycle of that. Our integration engine is quickly becoming one of our most popular products. The PRISM integration engine allows you to integrate with various different applications. I don't think we've found an application yet that we haven't been able to integrate with. And it allows you to connect to various different things. You can connect to web services. You can connect to major databases. You can connect to email, do email integrations. You can also do bidirectional exchange of data. So you can push data to and from PRISM. And it's system agnostic. So you're not limited to just integrating with PRISM. You can also build integrations between third-party applications without even touching PRISM. One of the strongest points of this integration engine is that it has an object-oriented interface. So you can actually connect PRISM to your various different applications in the user interface. You don't have to rely on a developer to do that. You can then do field-to-field mapping between those applications. And then you can start defining the workflow for how the data is going to move from one application to the next and what processes it needs to go to. Does it need to have email approval authority, or does it need to have validation checks? You can also build workflow in there and start defining logic rules. So if the data looks like this, then do this. If the data looks like that, then do that. And you can do this all in the interface. So you take ownership of your integration. We'll do the installation of this for you and get it set up. But then once we have it up and running, We'll train your team how to take ownership of this so you can do your own integrations. You don't have to come back to us every time you want to change something. So one of our major clients that we're working with right now, we're in the process of, they have a master WBS asset register, and they want every application to be linked to this master WBS asset register. And they want all their subcontractors to be linked to it. They want to make sure that everyone's using the same structure so they don't have these problems with coding. What we're doing for this client now is we're pushing this WBS asset register into our integration engine. And that integration engine is then being used to federate that out to PRISM for the cost performance, Costos for the estimating, P6 for the schedule, SAP for their ERP system, CMAR for the NEC contracts, and Zactium for the risk. And it's making sure that all those applications have the same WBS in them, or at least some level that connects them. Yep, it doesn't have to be at the same level of detail, but at least some common touch point between them. The other piece we're doing is CMAR is managing the NEC contracts, but PRISM is managing all program change. So as NEC contract changes are being processed in CMAR, we're going to push that into PRISM to keep the two completely synced up. So you don't have different numbers coming out of your contracts module than what you have coming out of PRISM. And you got a single source of truth that PRISM can report all your data on. And it can report both on cost and progress and also on commercial data. And the other thing we're looking at doing with them is now pushing, as payment requests come into the contracts module, or to the CMAR application that they're using, that'll push directly to SAP. If there's budget in there, it'll then route that budget for review and approval to the budget approval holder, and then automate the payment out to the vendor. So you don't have to manually process those payments. You can define the rules and how all that's going to be automated within your organization. This particular client is a huge project. They're managing billions of pounds. I mean, they'll be letting subcontracts that are billions of pounds. One of the biggest challenges they're going to have is how do we manage all this data and bring in all this data from all these subcontractors and make sure it's all accurate and get it into the system properly without having copy-paste issues and copy-paste errors, or have to have an army of people managing the data. So what we're in the process of doing now, too, is putting web forms in place where subcontractors can actually go to a web form and upload their progress data into that web form. Once they upload that into the web form, it can then go into the client's version of PRISM, and the client can review, amend, accept, or reject that data before it goes into PRISM. So they can get the updates directly from the subcontractors now, or the joint ventures that are supporting them. The other piece we're doing is a lot of the joint ventures are now looking at, well, why don't we use PRISM as well? That way it simplifies the whole process of integrating with the client's data. And so in cases where the subcontractor is using PRISM and the client is using PRISM, we'll simply do direct connections, PRISM to PRISM feeds. And there'll be two pieces of integration. There'll be one piece on the subcontractor instance, where the subcontractor can define the rules of how often they want to submit that data, what validation checks do they want it, do they want a review and approval process before it gets pushed to the client. And then we'll do another piece of integration on the client side where they'll say, okay, the data's now come in, what validation checks do I want to run on it before I accept it? Do I want to review, amend, accept, or reject this data? Yep. So we get complete integration and get all the data, the exchange of data between subcontractors and client, all completely automated. We also have a PRISM data warehouse, and we actually learned this from Crossrail. On Crossrail, they had a data warehouse that would take snapshots of their entire environment, and then they could go back and always look at previous period snapshots and do comparisons of it from period to period. We've now added that on top of PRISM. We learned that lesson from Crossrail. We've now added that so that clients have a data warehouse that will store all their data, take snapshots every period, and store that data. And it also builds the business intelligence objects to allow you to very quickly put dashboards in place and feed those dashboards. We can also create custom data entry forms. So if you have certain data that you want to track that we don't capture in PRISM, or you don't have an application to track, we can create a custom data entry form. You may want to track health and safety data. And instead of having it in an Excel spreadsheet, you want to have a form that people go in and fill it out, and it gets stored in PRISM, and then gets stored in the data warehouse. Once we start building those custom data forms, that data gets stored in the data warehouse, and you can then start propagating that to your dashboards as well. Or use the integration engine to automate all of that, if you have a third-party application you're using. So then we're able to quickly produce integrated dashboards, which will bring all your different project data together. And we have plug-and-play dashboards we can get up and running in about a week or two. If clients want more customized dashboards and they want to sit down and spec out how they want it to look, we can build those in a matter of weeks, very quickly. The other thing is ensuring data integrity and validation checks. So using the integration engine, you can define those data quality checks and those validation checks. So you're ensuring your data is accurate before it gets entered in the system. Or you're capturing data that may not be accurate that has been entered in the system. We also have data validation checks where we have linked pivot tables to PRISM. And these linked pivot tables, when you run these pivot tables, they run a whole series of data quality checks, issues that we find on every single project we go to. It runs this against all of your data and then produces a report that's live from PRISM that gives you all the control accounts that have data quality issues, tells you what issue they have failed or what data quality checks they've failed, and then tells you who the responsible individual is. So you know exactly who the touch point is to go to get that data fixed before you produce your period report. And then once you have all this data integrated and you have it all in the system and you got your single source of truth, then you're quickly able to do standard performance reports out of the system. And we have tabular reports, graphical, histogram, and S-curve reports, variance explanation reports, where you can actually set up variance thresholds, and the system will go through and only pull out the data that's outside of those thresholds. So you don't need to review every single line item of a project. You can focus on just the ones that are outside the thresholds you've defined. We have productivity reports, where you can start seeing productivity going up and down each period as different crews or design teams, what their productivity is, how many hours per drawing or how many hours per installation. Start producing bar chart and S-curves to start seeing when the different activities are occurring, what the plan was versus the forecast of that. So you have all that captured. Okay, any questions? Okay, if you guys do have any questions, based here in London, over in Canary Wharf, so feel free to get in touch. We can always set up some time to do a demo, and I can walk you through in a bit more detail so you can see a bit more about what we do. I was very pressed for time today, and that's why I kept this presentation short. But there's a lot more I can show you, and I can actually, we can arrange site visits if you want to come over and visit clients that we actually work with and hear their story about how they're successfully using PRISM. All right. Thank you.